Good morning, church. It's great to be with you in your lounge, your dining room, your study, wherever it is you're watching this morning. I hope you are well in body and in spirit. And I don't know about you, but as the days and weeks go by, I'm starting to wonder who it is I'm missing more. Because on the one hand, I'd really like to see my parents again. I'm really missing them at the moment. On the other hand, I'd really quite like to see my hairdresser right now as well. I haven't been brave enough to go down the home cut route. I just can't quite brave it, but check back in with me at the end of May and we'll see what's happening by that point. Anyway, as a church, we're starting this morning a new series, a 4-week series, looking together at the book of Nehemiah in the Old Testament. Now, if ever there was a book and a story that was applicable to the situation, the scenario we find ourselves in at the moment, then the journey of Nehemiah is that story. Now, don't worry if you're not familiar with Nehemiah's journey. I'm just going to spend this morning just setting a bit of context and unpacking the situation that Nehemiah found himself in, and hopefully relating it to what's going on around us right now. Essentially, Nehemiah's journey is one of rebuilding. Rebuilding physically, in that he rebuilds the city of Jerusalem from ruins, but also about rebuilding community, a community of God's people. Now, I want to share 2 brief points with us this morning, and then I'm going to leave you with a question to take away and perhaps reflect and pray about as your week goes by. The first point I want to make, and I'll unpack this in a minute, is that it's okay to mourn. It's okay to be sad. It's okay to be dejected and despondent. And the second point I want to make is that you need to trust in God. You need to trust in God, but you also need to be prepared to play your own part, as Nehemiah was. And the question I want to leave you with at the end of this morning is this: what is it that you're going to rebuild? And perhaps crucially, what is it that needs remodeling altogether in your life? Right now, we are in the middle of an international pandemic. One which sees us all restricted in our movement and our interactions. It sees some of us isolated from the outside world entirely. Thank goodness for technology at this time, enabling us to meet like this digitally in our own homes. I don't know about you, but I'm beginning to feel more and more cut off from the outside world. It's almost like we're in exile in our own land. And, that's exactly the position that the Israelites find themselves in shortly before the time of Nehemiah. This is around 500 BC, give or take. Now, exiled from Jerusalem, their homeland, they'd spent 70 years as captives of the Babylonians. And then eventually they returned to Jerusalem, led by Ezra. And Ezra is the book that precedes Nehemiah in the Bible. Now, the book begins with Nehemiah hearing about what has happened to Jerusalem. He is told, it says in verse 3, that those who survived the exile and are back in the province are in great trouble and disgrace. The wall of Jerusalem is broken down and its gates have been burned by fire. This leads into my first point this morning, that it is okay to mourn. It's easy to look at the character of Nehemiah and see him as this great activist, this person that rises to a challenge and gets on with stuff, this guy that had this vision and rebuilt the city walls. But verse 4 tells us that before he did anything at all, he wept. It says for days he mourned and fasted and prayed. Even when he eventually goes to see King Artaxerxes and ask permission to go and visit Jerusalem, before Nehemiah even opens his mouth, the king can see just by looking at him how distraught he is. I firmly believe that it is absolutely okay to be feeling scared, to be feeling worried, to lament what's going on in the world at this moment. Jesus said, "Blessed are those who mourn." We have an emotional God. I believe he weeps with us at what is going on. And I want to remind you this morning that it is completely legitimate to be feeling sad at a time like this. It is completely legitimate to be feeling a little bit broken and a little bit lost. Most of you know I was in Kenya back in November. Now, the communities that I visited there risk, frankly, being decimated by this pandemic. For many people, the risks of COVID-19 are only superseded by the risks of starvation, as their livelihoods grind to a halt under lockdown. My heart just breaks for those people. And I have this photo of some children in Kenya on my wall, and every time I walk past it, I'm reminded to pray for them. And this is really leading me on to my second point: prayer. Finding the right balance between trusting God, giving it all to Him, but at the same time doing everything in our earthly control to make the situation better. You see, Nehemiah prays to God, but he doesn't pray for God to fix everything miraculously. He prays for God to give him favour in front of the king when he asks for permission to go to Jerusalem. You know, right now we practice social distancing. That's why we're meeting like this through TV screens. We do that online not because our faith is weak and we don't believe that God is sovereign, but because we're doing our bit. We don't want this virus to spread, and the least contact we can have with other people, the better that is for everyone. It's just common sense, right? I saw this video online of a church in America continuing to meet despite government guidelines, and 200-300 people coming together every week. And this reporter was interviewing people as they drove past in their cars to go home, and he said to this lady, why are you still doing this? Why are you meeting? Why are you risking yourselves and risking others? And this woman leaned out of her car and just said, because I am covered by the blood of Jesus. And I thought, yeah, you are. But you're also going to be covered in a whole lot worse if you carry on meeting. We have to play our part, people. And it's worth pointing out here that Nehemiah, this guy that rebuilds the city of Jerusalem, he's not a builder. He's a cupbearer. He's the servant to the king. But as we'll hear in the coming weeks, he becomes all these other things: an architect, a construction worker, even a military general. And there's this sense in which Nehemiah was just prepared to do whatever God and the people needed him to do. You know, lots of us have taken on new roles in the last few weeks. I myself have become a part-time primary school teacher. A truly terrible one at that. I know a hairdresser who has become a delivery driver. Furloughed workers are being encouraged to become fruit pickers so that we've got enough food to eat. Hundreds of retired doctors, nurses, midwives are coming back into the profession to support the NHS and help fight this pandemic. Extraordinary times call for extraordinary measures. And you may find yourself in unfamiliar territory right now. It can be easy to slip into this mentality of every man for himself, just protect me and my own. But actually, Galatians 6 calls us to carry each other's burdens. And in this way, you will fulfill the law of Christ. When we come out of this situation, our nation, indeed our world, is going to need rebuilding. We're looking at a bigger economic crash than the one in 2007. Global travel completely disrupted for the foreseeable future. A report this week even suggested that up to 50% of the world's workers may find their livelihoods destroyed. And they're just practical implications. You know, Nehemiah may have orchestrated the rebuilding of the physical walls of Jerusalem in 52 days, but it took an awful lot longer to rebuild community. I don't know what stage you're at right now in terms of your own rebuilding. Perhaps it's just too soon to even ask that kind of a question. Perhaps you're pulling your hair out trying to become teachers like we are. Or perhaps you're worried about work and your income and what this means for you and your family. Perhaps loved ones of yours or even yourselves have been exposed to this virus, and right now you can't think beyond just trying to get better. Perhaps you're still mourning, like Nehemiah was. Perhaps this enforced lockdown is just what you needed. It's this beautiful detox from the busyness of everyday life, and perhaps right now you feel in a better place than you have done in ages. I remember Anna saying to us shortly before, just a few weeks before this all happened, our life is so busy. We need to do less stuff. It's just all too much. I think perhaps she wanted to see a bit more of me. I wonder if she's regretting that now, because she's seen an awful lot of me. She's probably sick of me by now. But the thing is, we are all in the same storm, but our boats might look different. But what I do believe is this, that God will be at the heart of our rebuilding, as individuals, as community, and as church. You know, when Nehemiah received the king's blessing to inspect Jerusalem, he sets in motion a plan to restore the city walls like for like, to get things back to normal. I'm sure you cannot wait for things to get back to normal in your life too. But I want to leave you with this challenge. What needs rebuilding like for like when this is all over? And what needs remodeling? Perhaps in some things, normal was part of the problem. Have you noticed recently, when you look outside, the sky seems strangely bluer than it ever did before? I wonder if that's in part due to the lack of pollution from reduced travel. Have you seen the videos online of the canals in Venice? The water completely clear and hundreds of fish, where before it would have just been a pool of mud. I've noticed so many of my friends joining the Strava running app, tracking their exercise, because now they're realising just how important exercise is to their physical and emotional health. Have you heard about how A&E waiting times have plummeted because people are thinking twice about going to the hospital with something that could just be easily treated at home? And can you think of a time before all this when we ever blocked out 2 hours of our evening to Zoom call with our friends or family just to catch up? We were always just too busy, weren't we? I mean, we have an incredible challenge on our hands right now, an international challenge. But we also have an amazing opportunity to rebuild and perhaps to remodel some aspects of our lives. So that's my challenge to you this week. What are you going to rebuild? And what are you going to remodel in your life?